Good. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to showcase Colin, Dave. Thank you. Appreciate it. Intellect, we are due diligence risk specialists. I'm just going to run through really what we do, not everything, but focus more on the due diligence side of things. The reasons become evident for that. Um, I'd like us all to think about this for a minute. We are the greatest risk to your business, and it might differ between industries, but for me, it's the one you haven't identified yet because they can come from us in all shapes and sizes and in all different ways. Um, and that's where we come in. We are a company that will identify, mitigate, advise on the risks. The one I'm going to talk about, which I think affects every single one of us, both personally and in business today, is about the threat to us from crime. Um, so these are the three pillars of our business. So we offer services in the way of investigations. We train people. So most of the training I do is around teaching people how to conduct due diligence, KYC, etc. But we also do AML training, cybersecurity, data protection. And we have a piece of technology called Investigation Engine, which makes the whole process much easier. Anybody that's in an AML regulated registered business will understand that. But I'll come on to it as we go through the presentation. Just a little bit about me. I'm a former senior cop. I was also the Director of Intelligence and Investigations at FACT, Federation Against Copyright Theft. So if you went to the cinema or you've been to the cinema, I used to get that little logo on the screen. I've run Intellect now for 15 years. I'd like to think I'm an enhanced due diligence specialist, so I delve deeper into people and companies, unpick networks, etc. They've done all manner of investigations over the years, and I created the Investigation Engine platform. So you've only just quickly go to Google, and you can see that crime is thriving for all sorts of reasons. I think when the economy's on the downturn, it tends to spike, but this is just a snapshot of just some news that you can see on Google and what's going on, not necessarily in front of our eyes, but it's certainly going on. And sometimes it's behind legitimate businesses, sometimes unknowing, but people commit crime predominantly to make money. And the whole sort of AML regime, for me, tends to focus very heavily on compliance without thinking about the reasoning behind it. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But these are just some figures, quite frightening, really. About how fraud is hurting us. So that's 40% of crime in England and Wales. And look at the figures there, 219 billion every year. Property is a huge issue in terms of money laundering, with an estimated 10 billion going through that. Human trafficking, modern slavery, huge risks, particularly in some of the industries highlighted there, cleaning, hospitality, manufacturing, etc. But then the other side of it, you've got asset managers, legal services, art, football, they're all at risk from money laundering because good money launderers don't get caught. But behind them, they could be sanctioned if they're laundering the money. And if you get caught with that because you haven't conducted proper due diligence, then you run the risk from all sorts of problems in terms of fines, etc., etc. So on top of that, on top of all those problems with crime itself, the regulators are getting serious now. So in July, you just got to look at the business number, the types of business that are coming under scrutiny, and the numbers of fines and the figures, not conducting proper checks. And the last bullet there, a law firm being fined £120,000 by the Solicitors Disciplinary Tribunal. That's because they failed to meet their AML obligations. Didn't identify a PEP, a politically exposed person, which lends itself to a higher level of due diligence, and then gave inaccurate assurance. Now, some of the time, these sort of regulatory actions aren't necessarily that they're involved in money laundering. It's a failure to demonstrate they've done the right checks and conducted the right risk assessments. So due diligence, fancy term really, but it's just for me, with my background, it's about intelligence, really, about a person or a company, so that you're in a better position to assess the risk, particularly around fraud. Who are you doing business with? Is there a suggestion they may be involved in money laundering? Is there adverse media out there? Could they be connected to terrorist financing? So it's all about better information so you can make better decisions and keep your business safer. Get it wrong, these are some of the consequences. You become, and you're an enabler, basically, if you're allowing them to sort of route money through your business. You run the risk of regulatory intervention. That in turn you'll suffer reputational damage. Google won't be your friend because it will remember you forever. Uh, Fines can be quite weighty. And potentially in some industries, you could lose your license, so your business is gone. Nobody wants to fail. So one of the questions I always ask when I'm sort of training people is, do you really know your customer? And one of the, particularly where people perceive themselves to be in those sort of low risk areas, they will say, well, I've known him for years. I go down the pub with him. I see him every month. We have a good chat, so I feel I know him. But that's not quite the same as having knowledge. And if I was a criminal, if I was laundering money, then I would never present as the business owner. I would either bribe, coerce, bully, or whatever, and get myself a clean skin to front the business. Um, and that's why many people don't get caught, because they're not, well, businesses can get caught because they're not conducting the due diligence properly. And this is an example I'm about to show you. I've had to sort of redact most of it, but it's a real investigation. Somebody came to me and said, I've got some concerns about this particular person that's coming to me for a license. I can't go into too much detail about what the license is all about, but um, essentially there was a dual nationality female had approached this company. The consultant didn't feel, just had a gut feeling that things weren't right. When I started digging into that person, she had a £4 million house in London, nothing wrong with that, but had no business profile really, nothing you could really find a history with. She had a number of companies, of which she was the director, um, lived in London. Her accountant, very newly qualified, lived in West Yorkshire, which again, not unusual, but it was a combination of factors here that I started to think that there's something a little bit odd here. So it did take some time, but eventually what came out of it was that she was connected to three foreign companies. And those companies were also connected to a sanctioned company, a company with lots of adverse media, and a renamed entity which had been in lots of trouble over the years. And behind that layer or layers was a high net worth individual. Now, he was, again, nothing wrong being high net worth, but this guy had done, over the years, he'd taken steps to distance himself from all those people that are involved in those three foreign companies. So, to all intents and purposes, he was clean, but he was connected to all manner of questionable sort of people, companies, and individuals. And had we not found that out and that had come out later on, that particular company would have been in deep trouble. I guarantee it, and would have lost their license. So that's where sort of instructing people like me comes in, because we can go deeper, and we can do it probably much quicker than um, yourself, and save you time and energy and your reputation. And mostly things go wrong because there's far too much digital noise. You go to Google, you get too many pages of results. People don't necessarily know how to navigate their way through search engines. I mentioned this, my client's low risk. I hear that so often. The commercial side of it, the risk versus reward. This is a client I really need to bag. It's going to make me lots of money, without sort of thinking about the risks that go with it. And there are clients that are going to present you with risks. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's just you've got to go in there with your eyes open and mitigate it. And part of that will be your due diligence procedures. It will never happen to me. Famous last words. It can and it will. And then the other one I hear, see a lot, buying the next best tool on the market. Well, I've been told to press this button and it does it all for me. There isn't the tool on the market that does that, even with AI. You always need those human skills, questioning skills, etc. But most important, not having a record of what you've done and when you did it, because things can change overnight. If you're able to demonstrate that I have done the very best I can with the information I have, then that's going to put you in a much better position with any sort of regulatory intervention. So the things that are a must really for any business, and are not even just not it's not just AML businesses or AML regulated businesses. So you've got to look for adverse media, and that's not a quick scan of Google. You must check sanctions. You need to understand if that person is in any way, shape, or form politically exposed, because they have a degree of power and they have connections which you need to understand. You really need to understand who are the persons of significant control, who are the UBOs, another term for the same thing, and the shareholders, who actually runs that company. And just because it says director, it doesn't necessarily mean they run the company. That's just a title. Have you checked the passports, particularly if you are in the employment side of things? That is a must. Have you looked at the jurisdictional risks if you're working with an overseas company? And then there are certain commodities that present their own distinct risks. Art. Why? In terms of money laundering, art can be the price that person wants it to be, that piece of art. And it's a great way of laundering money and hiding money. Cryptocurrency, oil and gas. Oil and gas there's a lot of connections there with Eastern Europe. Passports, do understand that you can purchase passports on the dark web. You pay in Bitcoin, it will get delivered to your address. And whilst it may not pass a border check, it will stand up to scrutiny most of the time if somebody presents that photocopy that you have in your filing cabinet to say you've checked that customer. So my advice, learn how to conduct focused online searches. Don't just Google. There are plenty of other databases out there you should be looking at. Things like Companies House, the Sanctions Register, bankruptcy, insolvency, all those sorts of things. Keep records of what you've done. That will records. I mean, I was brought up from when I joined the police in the 80s that, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. We used to walk around with pocketbooks and everything went into a notebook. Risk assess clients and businesses. And again, there's a process you can go through to do that. Keep records of them as well. And monitor and review, because situations can change tomorrow, next month, 6 months, but have a process in place that you periodically review based on the risk that you are seeing. Keep records, and please keep records. So I don't intend to run a demonstration of investigation engine. If it's of any interest to anybody on the call, then feel free to reach out. We can organize it. I'm just going to briefly touch on what it does. It will actually search for people and companies. So for a person search, you can do this by uploading a passport, and it will do what's known as an ICAO standard check. So that reads the machine readable zone on the passport. We are looking at another system which fits with where authorized corporate service providers are required to be, which is IDV, and that reads the chip on a passport. You use an app to read that. You can also search for people manually, because for some businesses, you may not need a passport and you may not have it, or you might want to check somebody that's associated with that person. So you can search for passport and it will run AI and other databases, and you can sort of do manual searches. So on top of the adverse info is run through artificial intelligence. We've also got pre-configured web searches, so it'll have words like bribery, corruption, court, all those sorts of things in the background to make it much easier, much more effective, better results. We search Companies House, the ICIJ database, which is very sort of offshore related, but it will identify where persons are connected to offshore companies. We do a sanctions and PEP search. We're using the most authoritative database that we know of, and all these are API feeds into the system. But there's also a company search which does similar things, but a little bit more detail. With the company search, we will return you the PSCs and the directors of the company on screen. And then you can download a report for your records. In actual fact, the AI writes the report for you. So it saves so much time. So company search is in there. We've also integrated client risk assessments. Some people know that as customer risk assessments. And we've integrated business risk assessments as well. So that aligns with the company search. So that's a very quick run through what we do. Mostly sort of focused towards the due diligence side of things. As I say, we do other things. We do trace people and assets sometimes, depending on the job. One thing I don't do, I've moved away from it totally for years now, is sort of marital stuff. It's just not my thing. So we are investigators, but our specialist area is due diligence. And from an ideal client point of view, um, we're looking for those working where the risk is the highest and where strong due diligence matters most to them. You can reach out to me on that email. You can connect me on LinkedIn. And if anybody's got any questions, feel free.
Yeah, I've a quick question for you, Colin. I know we've obviously got our follow-up one-to-one
Yeah.
round two
Yeah.
happening tomorrow. So a lot of this we've gone through on a personal note. Geographical exclusion zones and international trade.
Hmm.
Does there have to be a linkage to the UK, or can you actually do investigations into foreign companies that could be clients
Yeah.
that the funding could be potentially questionable?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do that. So I've done a lot of work with sort of overseas investigations and offshore, and the system we have will help us do that as well. So yes, is the answer. We can. I can't think of many countries I've not had cause to visit online, not physically. But
Mm.
yeah, a lot of it is sort of understanding how to navigate around the various registers and the databases. The foreign language obviously presents a problem, but we know how to do that. We have workarounds for all of that. But yeah, does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I say there's lots of different scenarios where, on an innocent thing years ago, we used to, topically probably then, we used to supply to a particular client out in Israel,
Right.
and why they needed armor-plated tractors, I'm not too sure. But agricultural equipment doesn't need that grade of steel, so
Sure.
you start to question: Are you actually getting involved in something that perhaps you
Yeah,
shouldn't be? But
yeah. Sometimes it's just wise to step back, isn't it?
yeah, no, that's fine.
Yes, Colin. I'll give you credit for knowing how to spell intellect.
It's deliberately spelt that way.
Of course, I
Yeah,
knew it was. And I'm reminded of many years ago when I used to be a normal accountant and I had clients. Those were the days. One client was a retailer of reproduction furniture, and he had a very big showroom.
yeah.
And at one side was a little sewing table where you keep your needles and thread.
Right,
There was a sign on it that said SOWING,
right.
as in sowing seeds. And
Ah,
I said, you need to correct this spelling. He said, Chris, you wouldn't believe how many I've sold to people who pointed out my spelling mistake.
now, there is a history to it. It's Intel, E for e-crime, as was many, many years ago, and CT my initials.
Ah, yeah,
So that's what's behind it.
yeah, okay. But
But
you
I haven't
can
sold,
spell.
I don't think I've sold anything on mine on that name alone. So
No, no sewing tables.
yeah, yeah, no, maybe I could.
Colin, can I just ask sorry, it's Richard Alderson,
Hi,
and I
Richard.
think we've spoken before, but I do tax investigations, so I do quite a lot of stuff around investigating fraud, due diligence, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Couple of things. First of all, do you think that the company's house changes that are coming in over the next few months are going to make a difference in terms of help with regulation, or do you think it's going to leave big holes in terms of looking at businesses and their credibility and things like that?
I think it will have some effect, but it's not going to stop the clean skin argument, that people are going to be put forward to sort of validate. And yes, I'm a fine, upstanding person, but behind that, there's a sort of all the criminality that's going on. So yeah, it does need to clean up its act, and I think everybody knows that. And there's still examples on Company's House of. I only saw a couple of days ago on LinkedIn actually. I don't know if you follow. Ray Blake and the other guy, they talk about companies that pop up as they've got a soft piece of software, and it was a crypto company,
Hmm.
and Elon Musk was one of the directors. So and there were a whole load of other things. It's not funny, but it's just how that has got past muster is beyond me. But hopefully, we keep our fingers crossed. But what do you think?
I think it helps. I don't think it solves the problem. I think it's a bit of a sticking plaster, isn't it? I think,
Is
but
it?
it's better than it was because Company's House was kind of getting a bit out of control, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the only thing I would say is that in my little tax world, HMRC are very interested in all of this stuff, and
yeah,
what they're actually they're interested in a lot of the things you talked about. Modern slavery. They're looking at a lot of stuff around employment taxes, but they're also looking at a lot of stuff around supply chains.
yeah,
So, but so the kind of customer due diligence that you were talking about
yeah,
is very important to them, and all the things that you said
yeah.
about, well, people might carry out checks but not keep a record is all very relevant because that's exactly what they say. But that's a hot topic for them at the minute.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, yeah, we've got to get on side with that, I think.
Hi, Colin. I've got a couple of questions, if
Hmm.
that's all right. Is there like a minimum sort of spend that you would start to do this sort of thing? If somebody's coming to you, I mean, you know, obviously we do projects of all sorts of different sizes. So at what
Yeah.
point should we be starting to think about knowing our customers better?
Well, it's a difficult one. This, it might be that you have an awareness already. I would always encourage you. You can do the very basics on Google anyway. And where you sort of recognise there might be something going on here, then and most of us have that gut feeling when we've been in business long enough to know there's something not right. And that at that point you can reach out to people like us. And at our lowest level, one of the services we offer is a sort of KYC screening. So we will run the system that we use for you and provide you with a report which sets out traffic lights and say, this is what we're seeing on the system.
Okay.
If you get all green, fantastic. It's 99 quid well spent. We do a UK address check for an additional cost, not much. We may say to you, look, there are some, you know, risks here. You then choose to either ask us to delve into it further, you do it yourself, or you just say no. So it's a bit like an insurance policy, and I think if you sense that I need to go that little bit further in my own checks, then definitely because that £99 is as against the fine is going to be money well spent, and we are. I always say, look, we don't sell cupcakes. It's a difficult seller's risk, but
Yeah.
when you see businesses get hurt with massive fines, you think that is totally avoidable.
Yeah.
Uh,
And if a business did their own due diligence and somebody had used one of these passports, for instance, is it enough to say that you've done the checks and you just didn't pick up the fact that it was a fake passport because that's not, I mean, how does that work?
Well, most of the time, what you're going to be doing, but I think on what you've just said, is you're going to be visually inspecting the passport. Now, I know for a fact that a lot of these people, what they'll do, they'll provide you a black and white photocopy of the passport, where we really should be demanding colour anyway. But it's very easy to fake passports nowadays. There was a piece going around on a post on LinkedIn recently about AI had created a passport and it looked really, really good.
Yeah.
Visually, you're going to say, yeah, I know our system flagged that as a fake. And I've got a couple of fake passport. I've got a couple of images of fake passports. Let me qualify that. And I've tested it through the system, and then they fail. So it's worth, and we can actually offer a system where it just does that for you.
But it's not enough as a business to show that you've done these checks. They've actually got to be valid as well.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're in the employment game, then that's something you really need to be sort of stepping up to as well.